Well, hello and welcome everybody. This is training number 4 of level 2 for Electus Society. I'm really excited because we're going to have a special guest that's going to be doing the entire training himself. So I get to take a break, which is nice, but you're going to learn a lot of great stuff from him. It's Nicholas Clay. Now, I'll just share with you a little bit about Nicholas. He is a mindfulness coach. He's been doing this for over 3 years now. I got to know him because both of us did Landmark Worldwide, the forum. And when you go through all those programs, one of the programs is a 4-month leadership program called Self-Expression and Leadership Program. And we really connected there because we were coaches. And so we've stayed connected with each other, and he's just a tremendous amount of knowledge and a great friend. And so I'm so glad to have you all learn from him, and because he's really passionate about this subject, and I hope that you gain as much value as I have from him before, listening to his other past presentations. So Nicholas, I'll give it away to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. I wanted to start off to see if there were any initial questions that anyone had for me. And if not, that's perfectly okay. Just wanted to open the floor so that as I go through the presentation, I can make sure that I can touch on that, because there's really so much to what I can say on mindfulness. I don't want to overstep if anyone has any specific thoughts. So is there any questions that anyone would have, or if you want to put into the chat? And if not, we're going to get started with a guided meditation that we'll have to get everyone centered and clear. All right. So at this time, I just ask that everyone to make sure that you're in a comfortable place. So whatever position you're in, sitting, laying down, standing, I hope everyone's sitting somewhere, is make sure that you're comfortable. And I ask you to be with your body and start conscious breathing. And we'll start with 3 deep breaths. And on the third one, I invite you to close your eyes. So we'll start with a deep breath in and out. Deep breath in and release. And on this third one, as you come in, deep breath. And I invite you to close your eyes, breathe out, and continue that breathing pattern. And notice what's coming up for you. What the body is aware of at this moment. What you are feeling. How you are feeling. Notice how your body is breathing. Do not judge yourself. Just observe what is there for you. Observe the interconnected union we have with the body from the inside out. Breathe through the nose deeply to the top of the breath. And release the breath and soften. Expel all the air from your lungs until you reach the bottom of your breath. Feel the body breathing. Remember who we are, what you stand for, and what's beneath the surface of our being. The interconnected self. Soften and surrender. Surrender to the pure ideas of you. The you that was before the world told you who to be. Breathe. Feel the breath. And remember who we are. Remember what's beneath us. The layers of us. Surrender the body. Breathe. Feel the body supported by what's beneath it. Feel the breath and become aware of the body. We are not the body. The body is a tool. We are the higher vibration of light and energy. Breathe and honor the tool. Honor the feet that support you. Notice your feet and what's beneath them. Soften the feet. Breathe and surrender. Soften the ankles and calves. Feel the vibration from the ground drawing up the legs, and soften. Soften the knees and thighs. Feel the breath. Remember who we are and why we're here together in solidarity with the body, the mind, and the higher vibrated self. Soften the hips and the buttocks. Surrender the body. Allow the body to breathe. Release the belly and notice the lower back and sacrum. Breathe in light and space there. Feel the breath. Open the mind. Relax the belly, seat, and gut. Notice the space in the body. Feel the breath. Soften. Remember who we are and the connection we have with the energetic self. Feel the torso breathing with fullness as the heart rises with deep love. And surrender. Soften the spine. Release tension in the back. Feel your arms get heavy as the weight is released from the shoulders. Soften the fingers, representing the details of life. Release the palms of your hands. What do you hold on to? Surrender. Soften. Breathe. Feel the breath in the body as a tool. Release the wrists and the forearms. Soften the elbows, biceps, and triceps. Breathe. Feel tightness in your arms, the tools of your embrace. What do you embrace? Breathe and soften. Surrender the body. Free the mind. We are not the body. The body is a tool. How do you use it? Bring awareness to the throat. Relax the throat. and open the throat. Release tension in the jaw and the mouth. Honor the words that come through with integrity, intention, and action. Release the face and jaw. Bring awareness to the ears. Pay attention to what you hear and take in. Surrender. Feel the body breathing. Bring awareness to the eyes. Soften the eyelids and the eyebrows. Bring attention to what you see. The mind remembers what you look at, stores information from the eyes and ears. Do you see or do you turn away? Soften and know the heart is listening. Feel the breath, soften the mind, the body. The breath is a tool to help us soften the body and remember who we are. The breath is a symbol of this movement of interconnectedness. Breathing is a privilege. Breathing is the catalyst of the movement within us. Surrender the body, feel the breath, and use your tools to breathe into the higher vibrated self. Feel the body breathing, interconnected and still. This is a movement. Remember who we are. Remember what's beneath you and surrender to the higher sense of self. We are energy beings vibrating together in union, in light, interconnected. Deepen the breath. Inhale through the nose, bringing in peace, and exhale slowly. Again, inhaling through the nose, bringing in love, and hold the breath. Then release, exhaling slowly. Remembering what you stand for, the interconnectedness of us. Again, inhaling through the nose, bringing in joy, holding the breath at our top, and then releasing, exhaling slowly. Remember what we stand for, the interconnectedness of us. At this moment, envision an ocean as far as the eye can see, with no shoreline in sight. See the waters, turbulent and flowing. And in the sky, imagine a single giant drop of water slowly falling from the sky into our ocean. As the wave from our drop of water moves towards the horizon, it leaves the water completely still in its wake, and so crystal clear we can see the bottom. At this moment, the wake of the water drop has cleared the horizon, and now all that is left is a completely still and clear body of water, the source of life itself. For our final breath, we will inhale in solidarity to the privilege of breathing, because we can breathe. And as we exhale, we honor those who can't breathe. And I invite you to slowly open your eyes. And as we open our eyes, we begin our experience brand new. And as we come back, I'd like to open the floor. I'd like to open the floor for any responses, and I would certainly like to hear what you felt and what you got out of that meditation, and reminding everyone there is no wrong answer or wrong way that you can have an experience.
I'll go, Nicholas. Like I said in the chat, I feel like a puddle of jelly. Like every time you kept relaxing, I almost imagined that I was just like sinking into the floor, and was really, really relaxed and I wanted to go down, but the chair wouldn't let me. And then the other thing was when you asked us to do some deep breathing, I was surprised on how much my muscles relaxed and I could actually hear my back crack, just from breathing itself. That usually doesn't happen. So I think that I needed that, how much tightness we hold. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. There is so much tension that we hold. And even when we think we're relaxed, you don't realize how much of our body we're still holding on to. Nice. So I see some in the chat. I like Susan said she almost fell asleep. I know, who was it? Open back up. Someone already asked for the video of it, which was cool. Oh, Susan did. Nice. Anything, Beth or Naisha, or if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Shayna? Any feedback or just really what your experience was?
Go ahead, Naisha. You can unmute yourself. Oh, Shania wrote very peaceful.
Hello?
Go ahead,
Yes.
Naisha.
Yeah, that's the same thing I was going to say. Very peaceful, very zen.
Nice. And when we practice meditation, I was sharing with Tim earlier, I find that many people enjoy a guided one, and I would strongly encourage at a minimum, whether it's guided, whether you practice breath work, to find the time or create the time, 5 minutes, a minimum a day, to meditate. And for some that's challenging, for others that's not too long of a time. And everyone can create 5 minutes a day. And it would be a tremendous benefit to have that practice, because the mind acts very much like a muscle. And when we're meditating, that is our exercise to build that muscle. And the more that you get used to creating that space, the stronger your mind's going to be when you are in situations that become overwhelming, because that practice lives in experience. And the more you can be familiar with that experience and being at rest, the easier it is to draw yourself back to. Very good. I like that. Susan meditates before bed. Yeah, there is absolutely no way to meditate wrong. Just put that out there. Doing the practice in itself, because it is a building, it's a building tool. It's just like if you're going to work out. If you can only lift 1 rep, you didn't work out wrong. You just have more strength to build. And with meditation, the goal is to get to the clearing that exists behind thought. And that brings us to that peace, to that presence, to the purity of our experience and energy before thought even arises. So there is no wrong way to do it. It's merely building up the strength to get to that place and hold it. The example I like to use is like the arm or the hand grips that like arm wrestlers and stuff I think use to strengthen their grip, or rock climbers. Yeah, perfect. That's all you're doing. You're strengthening that grip of being at that space. And if you hold it for 3 seconds, it's not doing it wrong. It just shows there's more room to strengthen that. Very good. So I see a bunch meditate before bed. Okay, great. So now I'm going to get into a presentation. I'm going to share a little slide deck with you guys. And some of the information is going to be dense, and it's going to be more of an overview. So one slide in particular, I could spend 30 minutes alone going over it, which I'm not going to do. So just keep in mind, this is going to be more of an overview unless you have specific questions where I can go deeper into. Yes.
Nicholas, I know that a couple people joined us a little bit while in the middle of the meditation, but you asked a great question at the beginning of the training to say about mindfulness. If there's anything that people have questions about and want to learn more, to just, share it with you or put it in the chat so that it can be addressed throughout the presentation. And one of my favorite question to always ask about mindfulness is, I already know about the presentation, but it's a lead up to it. We talk often of the ego. And so I want you, Nicholas, if you can, when people say, oh, that's just your ego, how is that different than what we learn in psychology about the ego? And what do people really mean when they talk about it all the time, especially from mindfulness, about spirituality and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I will touch on that when we get to the map. And what you'll discover is from a place of mindfulness, ego becomes much more simplified than where psychology comes. And some of you may be familiar with the ego, the id, the super ego. This really simplifies that. So I will definitely touch on that. Cool. All right. And yeah, anything else, please throw in the chat and I will look there. So a quote that I love referencing from Albert Einstein is, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And consciousness is our base layer of experience. And so that's what we're going to be getting into today. We'll go over what we have gone through, the guided meditation. We're going to go over what a distinction is. That becomes very important to understand this information, especially. And distinction also helps in the world. It brings a clarity to how we take in information and understanding the difference between what is and the interpretation we tell ourselves about what is. We'll go over what is mindfulness, because as this word and this topic becomes more popular, it's still a question that people ask. Well, we say mindfulness, what actually is that? And that's why the importance of distinction is there, because when you have the is of something, that is distinct as opposed to talking about something. We'll go over ego, which Tim brought up the question too, what our awareness is. We'll go through the known and unknown and how we can get stuck there. And then our conscious states. So that refers back to the quote to Albert Einstein, right? How can we solve a problem if we're still coming from the same state of mind or state of consciousness? And then we'll end on defense and triggers. So again, this is going to be an overview of all this information. And again, specifics you can throw in the chat. So starting off first with distinction. Distinction is a clear and complete outline of what something is, that also simultaneously creates a clear and distinct outline of what something is not. And the reason why you see a picture of, you got a tablet here, a computer, and a radio, and then we have an iPhone or a representation of an iPhone, is because phone is what I use to illustrate distinction. Probably one of the most widely understood words around. So what I'm going to do at this time is look up the definition of telephone. And so if we look it up, and if you want to fact check, you can look it up as well. This comes from the Oxford Dictionary. And a telephone is a system for transmitting voices over distance using wire or radio by converting acoustic vibrations to electrical signals. So that is the definition of telephone. And much of what we talk about in our communication, we're usually talking about a definition something or talking about something. Now, the difference between a definition and distinction is because by definition, that this would also be a telephone. And I'm sure if someone asked to see my phone, nobody would expect me to pull out this tablet, like is also represented there. However, by definition, this is a phone. The reason why this doesn't happen, though, is because we operate out of distinction, even though we don't realize it. We have a distinction in this world where we understand what a phone is. And it is very clear. Any single person that you ask for a phone, you're going to get something that you agree with that is a phone. a good amount of people, if not everyone, would agree that this would not be what they're looking for as a phone. And it becomes so clear where this is no more a phone than this glass of apple juice. It's no more a phone than this pen. This is no more a phone than this paperweight. See, so then when you take that into communication and understanding things, and then we say, what is something, it gets very clear. It takes away interpretation. It takes away gray area. And when we're focusing on mindfulness and the clarity that this represents, it's very important to understand distinction, especially when we get into the deeper, heavier aspects of consciousness. So what is mindfulness? This is something that can be heavily interpreted. So mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something, a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, and also used as a therapeutic technique, which is increasingly growing in the world today. And so being present sounds straightforward, and in a sense it is. However, there are things in our mind and our psyche and our subconscious, especially traumas and triggers that get developed, that keep us from being fully present. And that comes from understanding the essence of what awareness is and how these triggers and these traumas actually hold a portion of our awareness. So for this first exercise here, we have, this is actually a famous painting by Joel Sternfield. I want to make sure that I gave credit where credit is due. And what I would like for everyone to do is just take a moment, whether you type it in your computer, if you have a writing, or just take a mental note. What is it that you notice? And what is going on? And so I'll give you a moment for that. And then I would like some shares on what you notice, or type in the chat if that's more comfortable for you. And let's see, we'll go 30 seconds to take in the picture. I will go 1 minute even. Generally, when this is done, so Amy, I forget her last name, there is someone who uses art to teach perception and awareness and perspective. And so when she goes through these exercises, she actually recommends 5 minutes to look at each picture to get what's actually going on, noticing. So for sake of time, we'll go for a minute because it's really about bringing up the point of awareness and how it functions. Okay, very good. So before I read what's in the chat, I'll go another 20 seconds, and then we'll discuss. All right, so we have, and thank you everyone for your participation. Very good. We have, the first thing I noticed was the pumpkins. A closer look, I saw the fire in the background. All right. Then we have Caleb. Didn't even notice the house on fire until Tim posted a comment. Now, before I read the other comments, that right there, that's the essence of using these images as a teaching tool for awareness and perception. Because in this picture, that very same thing where you didn't notice the massive blaze in the background, which nothing wrong there. That's just one piece. And there's, for everything that someone did notice, I'm sure somebody else saw something else that someone didn't notice. And that essentially, it's representing our awareness or lack thereof. Let me read the rest of the comments here. So we have, didn't notice the house on fire, me too. Went to the firefighter picking up the pumpkins. So did everyone see the firefighter picking up the pumpkins or the pumpkin? The smashed pumpkins, fireman looking at the pumpkins, saw the fire, and then the market stand, then the fireman, then the smashed pumpkins. Yep, then saw the fire in the background. Tim didn't even notice that the pumpkins were smashed. Right, very good. So this is like in life. And what mindfulness brings and what it builds is awareness. And awareness allows us to see more of a picture clearly. Now, I've gone through this exercise before and I read the book on it. So there's many things that I've noticed. And what one of the illustrations or what the wording in the book was talking about is, well, one, if there's a massive blaze going on in the background, why is the fireman so casually looking and picking up pumpkins? So does anyone want to take a kind of a stab at what's actually going on in this picture? Right, so we see what you notice. What is going on here? So Tim has, he doesn't know. Cleaning up. What else do we got? So in life, when we're seeing images, of course, this is a still image. In life, when we're seeing images, there's what's actually happening, what's the objective. Beth says, not a clue, stepping away. Okay. So we have 3 people right now looking at it. We don't know what's going on. There are certain things that we do know, though. House is on fire, guys looking at pumpkins, pumpkin smash. So those are all objective facts. And then there's the subjective, the interpretation, and that's where things can get fuzzy in the world. In this particular picture, what's going on is actually a fire exercise where it's a controlled burn. They purposely lit the house on fire so that they could practice putting out the blaze. This is why the fireman is so casually looking at pumpkins. He's not worried that there's a giant blaze going on in the background. Right? He's probably the captain who's like, all right, guys, you take care of it. I'm going to get some pumpkins for the kids. And again, see, even that statement, that's a subjective interpretation, me saying that. I don't actually know if he's buying a pumpkin, if he's taking it, maybe he's putting it back. So this helps us learn the difference between the objective facts and these subjective interpretations that we make. And yes, Susan had it. Could be a controlled burn. The firefighter is getting sidetracked. Yeah, he might be. Very good. I also, before we move to the next slide, I also want to highlight the difference of perspective, how there can be 5, 6, 7 of us on this call looking at one picture and still walk away with different things that we saw, right? So we're not all seeing the same thing at the same time. One person didn't see the fire blazing in the back. Tim didn't notice the pumpkin smash in the foreground. So when we're going through life and we're making interpretations, a lot of times we assume that everybody is seeing what we're seeing. And just from this still image, we can demonstrate that that's not true. And just about every time, that's not so. We're not all seeing the same thing, or we're not all seeing it at the same time. And so a lot of times we get in arguments over situations because we're assuming that the other person is seeing the same thing that we're seeing and interpreting it the same way. And how could that be? Exactly. That is why the police asked for so many witnesses. Now, the irony of that is what's the word I'm thinking here? The worst piece of information historically when it comes to crime is eyewitnesses, because of this very fact. An eyewitness is really almost the worst kind of information you can have, because most of the time people interpret.
Nicholas, you broke up for a second with the connection. So you said eyewitness is the worst form of witness, and then it just blanked.
Oh, let me check my.
I think you'll be fine. Yeah, but
okay.
I just want to let you know. Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to information for crime scenes and things that happen, eyewitnesses are historically the worst piece of information to have when it comes to crime scenes and events that happen. And it's due to so much misinterpretation that goes on, to things missing facts that are right in front of them. Not because it's anyone's fault. Most of us, we don't build up our awareness or train that part of our brain to see more of what's going on, and also to notice the difference between objective facts versus our subjective interpretation or opinions of what happened. So the next step of understanding mindfulness is understanding where that area of growth comes from. Where is this expansion? What are we building upon? Where do our triggers lie? Where is the resolution to the traumas that we experience? So in this graphic, you'll see a more or less circle of representing everything that we know, hence the universe kind of image in that circle there. That would be, if we had a completion of that circle, it would be knowing everything that there is to know about everything as human beings. And I like that. So we have an agreement already with this picture. As far as you look at, we have what we know in that green sliver there, and we know that we know that. It's our cognitive function of knowing. Beth says, the older I get, the less I know. Well, I would say the older you get, the more you experience, the more you realize there is that we have left to still uncover, to still know. So we have what we know, and we know that we know these things. Like I know how to dial a phone number and use the phone. I know how to drive a car, and we can utilize and do something with that information we know. And then we have what we know that we don't know. I know that I don't know how to build a train from the ground up. I know that I don't know how to rebuild an engine. We can also use and do something with the information we know that we don't know. I know that I don't know how to rebuild an engine. So if something happens to my engine, well, I already know that I need to contact someone else that does know how to do that. And in both of these sections, it's in our knowing. We either know we know something, or we know that we don't. And so if that's the green and that's the blue, the rest of the circle is what we don't know, we don't know. Now, my question is, I gave away the first answer. What can we do with what we know? Well, we can use and do something with the information and knowledge that we know, whether we know it or we know we don't. My question for you is, what can we do with the information that we don't know we don't know? Okay, Susan says research. What would you research? Topics of what I want to know. How would you know what you want to know if you don't know that you don't know it? Right. So Beth says, I'll research anything that interests me. Shania says, isn't it just experience? Yeah, experience can definitely expand that by accident. Talking what I don't know with what I know. So that's, Susan, that's still in your knowing. You're still talking about what you know. You know that you don't know it. Yeah, very good. I like the attempts here.
What I'm trying to say is that taking what I know and taking what I don't know, like know that I want to be an advocate for addiction and deaf and people that are deaf. Okay. I'm taking what I know about addiction and deaf people and comparing it to what I don't know about advocacy, and then researching advocacy on those two subjects.
Yep, I get that. And that's still coming from your knowing. So the question is, what can we do with what we don't know we don't know. And everyone so far is showing the example of when we're stuck in our knowing. Yep. Be optimistic. I like that. I don't know that I don't know anything until it happens. Then it's like, shoot, I didn't know that. Yeah, and we can call that a discovery. So so this comes down to communication and into the language of it. The question is, what can we do with what we don't know we don't know? Now I'll go to the next, let me ask it another way before we go to the next slide here. When we're driving in a car, what's that area in our side mirrors that we can't see?
That's our peripheral, well, it's our blind spot. So,
Very good,
yeah.
Beth. And that's what that area is called on the circle there. It's our blind spot or the unknown. And the brain is actually wired to avoid the unknown. So now let's use the car example. We'll make it tangible. We'll make it real. What can we do with the information that's in our blind spot when we're driving?
Adjust our mirrors.
Okay, let's say the mirrors don't adjust.
We better be
Physically
paying
look.
attention to what's going on around us.
Yeah, very
Physically
good.
look.
Yep, very good. So you can look. Now, what if you didn't know that that blind spot was there?
You wouldn't know to look there.
Very good.
Wouldn't know.
So if you didn't know to look there, yet it is there, what would you do with that information that's in that blind spot if you didn't know it was there, so you didn't know to look? What could you do with it? Shouldn't be driving. Well, you're gonna like where this analogy goes. Very good, Tim. Of course, Tim has had this experience. So the answer is nothing. There is nothing you can do with that information if you're not even aware the information is there to begin with. That's just how our mind works. When you're driving in the car, think about how you first discovered there was a blind spot in the first place. Because 10, 15 years ago, like there is currently, there was not indicator lights on our cars, if you have a newer vehicle, to tell you there was something there. So once upon a time, when you were learning how to drive, you either bumped into something and you found out, oh, where did that come from? Oh, that was my blind spot. As someone was saying earlier, you discover something. Oh, there was something there. Or someone told you when you first started driving, hey, remember, you have a blind spot there, check it. And that's exactly what goes on in our brain. We have a blind spot in our mind where we can't see outside of. Yeah, SUVs are the worst. Right? And so imagine a world, if we go back to the driving example, right? Imagine a world, or at least in America, where there's mostly roads everywhere, where every single driver was driving a car and nobody had an awareness or knew that there was a blind spot. How do you think driving would be on the road? Dangerous, no bueno, which translated is no good. That's what I got out of 5 years of Spanish class. Not much worse than it is now. I get that, Beth. It wouldn't be good. And I think we can have a general consensus on that. It wouldn't be good. We know that. And so I want to take a moment for you to understand that that's how most of the world operates mentally. Most of us are not aware that we have a blind spot in our minds. And what mindfulness coaching does is illuminate that blind spot to have intentional growth, to have intentional discoveries. Yes, you can learn through life experience and things happen, and then you can discover things and realize, oh, I didn't even know that I didn't know that. With mindfulness, though, there's a lot of how our mind operates that we do know. Like, for one, we know and understand there is a blind spot. one of the biggest pieces missing in our society is we just don't advocate that. See, when we get into a car, we're all aware there's a blind spot, or we have little indicator lights or dummy lights that there's a blind spot. Yet when we get this human body, nobody tells us, hey, there's a blind spot, make sure you check it. Because if that were the case, we would all become undergoing constant growth all the time, and we wouldn't get stuck like most people are in their knowing. Because most of the time we're stuck in what we know or know we don't. So the second brain exercise. What does this picture mean? And why does it mean that? So I'll give us a minute here. I am right on time. I'm doing good. So you can go ahead, I'll give us 2 minutes. You can throw it in the chat. What does this picture mean? Why does it mean that? Susan says we need to grow. No idea. There's no wrong answer. What does it mean? Why does it mean that? We have 1 more minute. Life happens. Tim says he sees scientific revolution, workers, people smoking up. Oh, there is. Yep, another 20 seconds. What does it mean? Why does it mean that? So I see the what, I'm not seeing the why. Oh, not quite. Gotcha. We got a trigger for you. Day 9 of not smoking. My apology. I was not aware. I didn't mean to trigger that. And I wish you all the best on to day 10. All right. So as we conclude our 2 minutes, literally there is no wrong answer, and I don't have the answer. I picked this picture because of diversity of it. I was looking for an image that was very dynamic, and to illustrate the different perspectives that we come from, and to show how different people are going to see different things coming from the same image. And there is no wrong answer, and there is no right answer. One thing that mindfulness teaches us that can be confrontational or difficult for people to digest is that right and wrong is inherently subjective. There is no wrong answer that you can give about this painting. Now, I'm sure further research, there is a meaning that the artist had intended when they painted it. However, for this topic, for this exercise, and because I personally don't know the meaning or did that extensive of a research, it was merely used to demonstrate the difference of our perspective. And as we got a bunch of different answers, we got we need to grow. We got life happens. We got scientific revolution, workers, people smoking it up. We got science can help solve the world's ills. To show that growth always happens. And not cool to show smoking because Somebody's on day 9 of not smoking. Okay. So we have all those different perspectives from the same image. Again, going back to life and what happens. There can be 100 people looking at one event and we can take away 100 different perspectives. So it becomes important to be able to distinguish the difference between objective, what's actually there, as opposed to the subjective. And so that gets very important again when doing a mindfulness practice and understanding the concepts of mindfulness. How can one stay mindful? Because it's not about the people around us. It's about ourselves. And that's one of the biggest challenges. Mindfulness is about understanding others, not judging and criticizing. And I'll show that in the next map we're going to go over. That's a great question. And so the whole question was, how can one stay mindful when there are people that don't accept that? So we're going to dive into that, and this will be brief because again, these next maps get a little heavier. These are the 4 spaces of human energy. Remember, fundamentally, everything comes down to energy. The words that I'm speaking right now is nothing more than vibrating molecules going through the air, which is all energetic, that our ears are picking up and receiving, that go to the mind, get converted to electrical signals, and produces language because we can recognize these specific vibrations. It's all energy. So we have how we show up in the world as our personality, our tonality, our character that we bring to the scene. Then behind that, we have how we're being, our movement and actions. Behind that, we have our way of thinking, which is our perspective and opinions. Our way of thinking is what builds our way of being. That in turn builds our personality. And mindfulness is about getting to the ground floor of what's behind all that. Where does everything come from? Our being comes from our state of mind or our state of consciousness, which is experience. So if we dive deep into that white circle, well, we get this. This is our consciousness. This is our state of mind. We operate out of 17 different states. There's 8 positive or the higher mind. There's 8 lower or the negative mind. And there's what I call the bridge, which is courage. And courage comes from a Latin word cor, C-O-R, which means heart. And it takes heart to transcend from our lower mind to our higher mind. Consciousness is experience. And ego, as Tim brought up earlier, ego is the identity a person gives themselves. It is that simple. It is that distinct. It is not good. It is not bad. It's what is. Ego is our identity. What we normally and stereotypically associate ego is an inflated ego. And even that can get mischaracterized. A big ego is giving an inflated importance to oneself. Normally people see it as being arrogant or cocky. That is not necessarily always so. You can be a nice person, your personality, and have a high ego when you start learning the components of how ego operates. And awareness is the objective observation of all there is, of our environment. As we're moving lower on the map of our consciousness, as we move lower in our experience, well, that creates a bigger ego, a bigger self-importance. It's all about I. In the bottom, in the lowest state of mind, and one of the lowest wavelengths of mind is shame. And so the highest place to be is enlightenment. Shame becomes all about self, miserable, humiliation. It's what we hide. If we're shameful of something, we don't want to share that. It just becomes all about us. Nobody understands, or I don't want to share this, or primitively, it's if I share this, I won't be accepted into the group. When in reality, the shame that most, if not all people hide is very common in the world. We just wouldn't know because we don't share it. And enlightenment is not having an eye there at all. It's becoming the observer. It's observing without judgment. Another way to look at this is, as we move up the scales of consciousness, we're moving towards understanding. And as we move lower the scales of consciousness, our state of mind, we're moving towards judgment. And awareness and judgment, it's like a teeter-totter. If judgment goes up, awareness goes down. If awareness goes up, judgment goes down. That's how it works. We have in the chat. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Cool. Now, again, this map alone, I could spend a lot of time in, so this is just an overview. I'm not going to do too deep of a dive. I also don't want to overwhelm anyone here. You can always follow up with me if you want to learn more about this. And this is a 3D representation. This is something I created recently to give more of an abstract view, because a little bit more about the map is also perspective. So that object in the middle looks like a elongated egg, I would say. That object is merely representing reality, the present, at all times, which is always now. And so the rings in this 3D model are a literal representation of perspective. So as you're functioning from different states of mind, you can see that you're seeing the object from a different perspective. It's still always the same object. It's always now. It's always the same picture. Well, why do different people see different things if we're looking at the same thing? Because we're coming from different perspectives and different states of mind. And the wording towards the rings is giving a context of what that state of mind looks like, what it feels like. Our awareness, the rings grow. Our awareness grows as we go up the scales of consciousness. On the bottom, the rings shrink. Our awareness shrinks. Our perspective shrinks. We have a narrower view of reality as we move down the scales. One of the fascinating things I think is fascinating is our sense, our resolution of the world enhances as we build our awareness. What do I mean by that? Well, if we're functioning down in shame, it's like watching the world with a TV with a resolution with 480p. And if you're functioning from enlightenment, you're now looking at the world like you're watching a TV in 4K. That's an analogy of how that actually functions in real life. Yeah. And the numbers, they ask, what do the numbers mean? Yeah, it's a great question. So the numbers are there to represent the scaling of it. So the map of consciousness is scaled from kinesiology. And kinesiology is the study of muscle strength based on the state of mind. So in a sense, the numbers it's arbitrary. However, it's a measurement. So they created a unit of measurement from 0 to 1,000 to scale this. Right. So that's what the numbers represent. It's just a scaling way to measure. Yeah, that's a great question. So how do we get that scaling of measurement? So kinesiology is quite interesting, and there is a precise way to scale it, and that's something that I don't personally do. If you want to look more into that, you want to look up David R. Hawkins. That's who's done the research and who has taught through his writing kinesiology and the states of consciousness and how that scaling practice is conducted. It's very fascinating. It's backed by a lot of blind and double-blind experiments. It's quite fascinating how they do it. So if you want to look more into that, David R. Hawkins is the author of that. Yeah. And then if you want to look at brain wave studies that coincide with this map of consciousness that shows the hertz of our brain waves when we are in these states. So now you have kinesiology and you map that over to brainwave patterns. You can find an abundance of that from Dr. Joe Dispenza, who does a great job. And he also has a couple books out that can teach you about that. And so you can get a wealth of information from that. And again, you can always follow up with me. I can essentially give you the juice from all those books of how it works. However, if you want the full depth of context, then those are the two people that you're going to want to look up for how this is put together. All right, so I'm going to be brief on this as we close because I'm a minute over. So I do apologize for that. So then we have our defenses and triggers. And so to relate back to the map, all our defenses and triggers are created from our lower mind. This is our survival. This is our fight or flight. This is our protect me, defend. So any trigger or trauma that you have, it gets created out of the experience of pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, or shame. This is the challenge of growth and healing the mind, because to do that, we need to revisit the experience in which the trigger or defense lies. And so you have to get through that piece again. And what happens is, as you release that energy, you move up these scales. So now you're not changing what happened, you're changing your energetic state in relation to what happened. And what you realize is you begin to see it in a whole new way, moving up towards understanding, coming out of judgment. Shame and our triggers and our traumas all come out of judgment. And the reason why there's parachutes here is because the analogy I use, if you look at our key defenses, they come from 3 fundamental experiences that we have in life that all humans go through. And so we create these 3 primary ways of being that we trap ourselves in. And that's what allows us to, get through life, or quote unquote win at life. And it's not that they're bad, because they were designed for us to survive. That's why we were here today. It hasn't always been 2022. We haven't always had the comfort and convenience that our technology has brought. For humans for a long time, truly were survival. We were in fight or flight all the time. So these have been very beneficial. Why mindfulness is growing now is because much of our societies are no longer in survival when you think of the essence of what survival truly is. Most of us are not actually surviving. And if you think about a parachute, well, if you're jumping out of a plane and you're in impending doom, you're in true danger. Well, yeah, a parachute is the best thing in the world. Our defenses when we're in survival, best thing in the world. However, when you land on the ground and you're no longer surviving, what good is that armor? What good is that parachute still attached to you? And so what we do a lot in the world is we try to muscle our way through everything. We try to compensate ourselves. We just try to be better, be better, be better. And what I offer individuals as coaching, teaching, and as a question is, wouldn't it be a lot easier, instead of overtraining to compensate yourself? Wouldn't it be easier if you just found where those straps of your parachute are and release them? Then how well could you move around and be mobile and get through life? That's what mindfulness allows us to do when taken in properly and authentically, and not through interpretation of how each person wants to see mindfulness, because mindfulness is reality-based. It works the way it works. And if you work with it, you'll get the results. And if you try to interpret it, then you're just going to be lying to yourself, and you won't really see the lasting benefits. And you'll just be someone who talks about it instead of actually experiencing it. So thank you everyone for attending. I am 5 minutes past the plan, so I do acknowledge and apologize for that. And then from my understanding, we'll have a little time for Q&A, and I'm happy to talk further. And I hope that you got some value and really enjoyed the presentation. That's my time.
While people are thinking of different questions, I just wanted to say thank you, Nicholas. And I actually really got something that I just wanted to share to you from what I got from your presentation. With the kinesiology and the different strength, and it was just interesting to see the lower numbers. It only increments by 10 when you're in these kind of emotions, but when you are in the joy, peace, and enlightenment, it's an exponential difference every kind of step up. And I have a garden in my backyard, and I have two stories of where one, I was trying to figure out a problem. I was like, anxious and things like that, and I couldn't solve it. And then one other time I was very calm and relaxed. And then I walked right past that garden, and instantly I found the solution just because my state was different. And that happened again today, where I was like in a rush and I'm like, okay, the cucumbers are almost done in the season. I need to cut them and bring them to the backyard. And then when I came out again the other day, and I was just very calm and relaxed, and I was just walking in my backyard, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a humongous cucumber. I totally missed that one. And then they're like, oh my goodness, there's another one. Like, how did I miss these? These were like so huge and in my face, and I could not see them at all. So I'm starting to understand the idea of changing the way you are being, so that being present, because guess what, with awareness and mindfulness, you can actually see much more than you would if you're then operating from those states of, anger, fear, judgment, hatred, all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And that kind of sharing is so important, and that's helpful, because what makes the coaching I do impactful is not just teaching. So what I went through, now you have a cognitive knowing, and you may go through this entire presentation and say, well, that makes sense. However, you may not realize what it looks like or what the actual experience of it is. And what Tim just got for himself, that's considered a paradigm shift, where you're able to take that knowing and then be able to bring it to an experience, and you can see, oh, that's what it looks like. Like when I say that shame is looking at the world at 480p, you can understand, like, okay, I get a TV has a lower resolution. However, you can't get the essence of what that means in real life until you see it for yourself, and you actually watch your vision increase and enhance, and actually see yourself seeing more. And when you start paying attention to, oh, well, I was in a higher state of mind then. And when I missed the cucumber, I was kind of angry that day. Because again, everything in the world is energy, or another way to look at it, or what science describes, is everything is information. So when we have a narrow perspective, and this representation, this 3D representation doesn't even do it justice. When we have a narrow perspective of the world, we're blocking out a lot of information, and that's how we don't see things. It's literally not there. And so we are opening up the world, like you did, Tim, walking through the garden. You literally opened up your world, and we have the power to do this. It's just having effective and proper practice of it. And you got to have the focus of doing it. And fortunately, that's something that's still growing and developing, is, okay, this information gets so heavy, so deep, it's so wide, that a lot of times there's so much interpretation around it that we don't have the focus of what it is. Thank you for sharing that. That was great. I'm gonna look in the chat. I see some stuff there. Yes, that's a great analogy. Seeing through different colored glasses, that's a great example. If you can imagine, if you had a pair of glasses, and just like you see the colors on the map of consciousness, imagine those are all the colored lenses. And as you move up, you're taking off lenses, so you get clearer and clearer. That is a great analogy. One of the best things you can do in life is to stop trying to manipulate the past, understand what happened can't be changed, so we need to accept it. Look for the good that exists in every experience and move forward. That's an amazing mindset. Yeah, and that's a great thought to have in the background. Also, too, I've been starting to upload videos on my YouTube page where I take specific areas of mindfulness, and I talk just specifically about that. There's one that's specifically about ego. So it's like 14 minutes just on ego to really make it clear. There's one on awareness. There's one on presence. So that way you can get these in little chunks, because what I went over was a breadth of a lot, and it was just kind of combing over all of that. There's hours more to really get the fine tuning of it.
So Nicholas, as we turn to specific action steps that we could take, from students watching, because again, that's part of the post assessment that before we leave, I want to make sure everybody fills it out. So I included the link in the chat, is what are the action steps that they can walk away with? And one of them I think is loud and clear, is how important we need to meditate, and meditate for 5 minutes a day. I've actually, my goal has been to meditate not only in the morning And at night before I go to bed, I notice that I actually have better dreams when I feel more well rested when I meditate before I go to bed. And then the second thing is, if I could actually do it for a couple minutes in the middle of the day, that you hit that moment in the day where you just kind of feel a little sluggish. Maybe it's a food coma or whatever it is, but just having that white light or just imagining it hitting your body, I just feel like it's almost as if I did a workout midday where you actually feel energized. So that's my kind of goal, is midday to just do that. But any other recommendations of actions that we should be taking as a result of, now that we have all this information from this training on mindfulness?
Yeah, some practical steps is meditation, definitely a strong practice, and it's truly the practice of mindfulness.
Mhm.
Practically understanding that our higher mind operates in understanding and that our lower mind operates in judgment. So that's very helpful. And having a conscious practice, where I like to start people when it comes to the higher mind, is that acceptance. If you could practice acceptance and understand that acceptance does not equal agreement, that's a great way to strengthen that experience. And the stronger you make that experience, the easier it is to bring life to that. And that can become your base layer where you can accept something. And then you'll prevent yourself from getting stuck into the lower mind. That's another practicality. Reading positive stuff, self-development, and maybe that probably sounds obvious. However, it may not be, because not only is it about ingesting and constantly growing yourself, when reading itself has a lot of benefits to the mind. So I personally would recommend reading self-development. However, just reading positive information, because there's a whole, that gets more into neuroscience. There's just a lot of benefits from reading in general. And mindfulness is about strengthening the mind. And so that's another tool to keep the mind healthy and strong.
I have a follow-up based on that. You mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm a big fan of his just because I've seen him in person. I've met him. He did trainings for the National Society of Leadership and Success, my former company. Has the most soft, gentle hands I've ever met a person in my life. I shook his hand. I'm like, is this a feather of an angel? Like, I couldn't, like, has he touched anything in his life? It was so soft and supple. It's just a funny anecdote. But anyway, he's done so many different books, and I've been listening to him about abundance. But are there any books of his, if we could read one book of his, do you have that recommendation of what that might be? And then my second question, if I'm not overwhelming you, is, have you read the book The Biology of Belief, which I'm very eager, I've heard a lot of good things about it, that I wanted to get your take on that as well.
I have not read that book, and I do have a book recommendation. I'm trying to think without running to the bookshelf there. I'm pretty sure it was called Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. I'm pretty sure. I can follow up with you on the book, though, again, without running to the bookshelf.
He has another one called You Are the Placebo. I have not read it, and then there's just a lot of that he's done, and I didn't know which one you'd recommend. But Supernatural, okay, I'll remember that. Let me look it up.
Another good practical tool, and this is something I used a lot within myself to remove trigger after trigger after trigger. All triggers are based from our ego, and the only thing that can be offended is an ego. How do you navigate that? Well, we know ego is identity. So if you find yourself being offended by something, use that as a tool to navigate, what am I identifying with that's offending? I'll give you an example. For much of my life, I identified as being an athlete, and specifically a basketball player. And how does that look? I am a basketball player. So now if someone critiqued that, I would need to defend that, because I'm defending my identity. Well, if someone came up to me and said, well, Nicholas, you suck as a hockey player, that's not going to offend me. So that phrase in itself is not offensive. It's only going to offend you if you identify. All right, well, how would you play basketball not identifying someone critiques you? It's very easy. You can say, I am someone who enjoys playing basketball. Or for example, when I introduce myself, I don't say I am a mindfulness coach. I always say that I coach and teach mindfulness. I don't identify with the position. It is something I do. It is not fundamentally who I am. Now, I've taken this practice, some may say to an extreme. I mean, I've gotten to a point of completely disidentifying. Truly, there's nothing anyone in this room could say that is going to offend me. And if you did, again, I'm so proficient at navigating it, I would go and I would unhook it from myself. So to go that far, if you're not coaching, you don't, I'm not going to recommend it because it brings some unique challenges. However, if there's some things that you keep getting offended by, you don't have to go to the extreme of completely removing an identity and then seeing, oh, how do I bring this back? Because I want to actually exist in the world. And, you know, that's going from creating yourself and bringing yourself renewed. You can look at how am I identifying and what level of importance am I giving to that identity that's causing me to need to defend myself, especially in such trivial things. When it comes to life, being criticized as being a bad basketball player is really insignificant when it comes to living life. And that is something I literally have gotten in fights over. And that's how serious the ego can get when we're defending something. Now, that's just my personal example. I'm sure in your life, though, and everyone here, you can find something that you got so mad over because you were offended when that offense merely came to an identity that you gave yourself. And again, if we went further into that work, you'll see how much of a lack of substance that identity is grounded in. Or another way to say that more directly is it's grounded in nothing except your thought. The ego is thought, thinking that it's something outside of itself. And what self? Our higher self is the energy that's inhabiting this host body for the time being. Now that gets a little deeper. I don't, you know, again, don't know how far we want to go into it. But at the core of our self, there's no identity. Enlightenment is pure observation. It is just being.
Nicholas, you suck at basketball.
That's funny. Yeah, you have a better shot of saying I suck as a mindfulness coach to try to get a reaction out of me. Oh man.
Cool.
And it's powerful. You know, I used to so easily, I was triggered. I used to have a very high ego, and it was so energy draining to constantly be defending and proving myself, and to be able to walk through the world and be with people and not be reactive or triggered by anyone's comments. It saves a lot of energy, and we can get into the whole biology of where that's beneficial to any organism. And that's, again, that's a whole nother conversation. I've studied way too many different areas. It just saves a lot of energy. It's freeing, and you're powerful, because hurt people are the ones that look to hurt others, to trigger others. And that goes back to Eckhart Tolle. He talks about the pain body, and that pain body is stored negative energy, and it needs to feed. So people that will, whether it's intentionally or subconsciously, they're looking to trigger you with comments or passive aggressiveness, that's because they're hurt. Hurt people look to hurt other people. Nobody from a state of love is looking to criticize anyone. Nobody's criticizing from the experience of love. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So if you're causing judgment, especially, where does this happen the most? What we do to ourselves. Because here's another little tip. All criticism that we think we're giving to other people, subconsciously we're criticizing ourselves. And oftentimes it's a prejudgment, because what we're saying is, well, I wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't be that person, when in reality what you're saying is, if I were that person, this is how I would criticize myself. If I did this, this is how I would criticize myself. And then growth gets really difficult, because as you start growing, you run back into your own criticism again. And then you have to be face to face with that. Because then you find out, oh, I was doing this, or I was doing that. Oh, I was that person. There's a lot of little tools, and then it gets very easy to see where people are at. See, we're not good at hiding where we are or what we're doing. What I discovered through mindfulness meditation and practicing observation at the level that I have is that we're just really bad at observing. And when you start observing the world and you stop criticizing the world, things become very obvious, very open. You see people very plainly, and then you realize that you have the power to not be in certain situations. It's not that someone did something to you, is you put yourself in that situation in the first place. They were just being how they were going to be. Most people are operating on autopilot. So they're just going to do what they're going to do. They're stuck in cycles because they don't even know there's a blind spot to begin with. They don't know that there's certain experience markers that were developed that's having them do something out of a reaction that they're stuck in. And then they think that's them being them. That's who I am, when they're just identifying with a trauma and they don't realize it. And then you can watch people just do the same thing, cycles, right? Like if you know someone's trigger, you can have fun with someone and just poke it whenever you want. Like if basketball was still a trigger for me, I literally could not control being triggered if someone said you suck at basketball. I couldn't do it. I could try to mask it. However, inside, it would still get me every single time someone said it. And it can be that easy. It's like, what do we call in society? Pushing people's buttons. Yeah. Well, it's very powerful when you don't have any more buttons for people to push. What are you going to push? And then who ends up looking like the jerk now? It's the person, what are you trying to poke for? And people from a healthy mind, from a higher mind, they're not the ones poking people. It's people that are hurt that are trying to poke others, because to make themselves feel better, we have to push other people down. And it's a manipulation to ourselves. And then we get a dopamine kick. And again, we get into another conversation. Oh. Okay. Yeah. It does get a little deep. For the past month, I've been practicing being light though. So I really try not to go too deep right away anymore, at least. A little bit more gradual as I get there. So any more questions or thoughts or comments, or I don't know, Tim, what time we're going till officially, or
we have up until 7. So does anybody have any final thoughts or comments that they want to share with Nicholas before we sign off? Thanks, Shania, for saying she loves this.
Awesome.
Yes, I wanted to say something. This was amazing because I'm currently in a process of like trying to stop running away from my traumas and things that bothered me a lot. So just like last week, I had went through something, and because I went through it, I would avoid not talking about it or like not seeing the person. But then something sparked in me, and it was like, well, I'm tired of feeling anxious. I'm tired of feeling like angry and having all these negative feelings, because when I do feel negative, I could feel it in my body, and it's not a good feeling. And so when I finally, had the courage to like, all right, I'm going to talk about it, I talked to the person, and I was able to like voice out like why I felt the way and how the situation made me feel. And then after the conversation, I felt so relieved. I felt so peaceful with myself. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why am I keep running away from things that hurt me, when it's like, yeah, it hurts at the time, but once I like get through it and talk about it, I do definitely feel better at the end. So I'm definitely in a process of trying to like keep doing that, like stop trying to ignore the traumas in my life and trying to talk about it more. Because once I do feel like so relieved. I feel like a lot of weight coming off my shoulders. So yeah, that this whole training that definitely like just made me think about that, because it's like I do see the good in me continuing not to avoid traumas, but talking about it and growing when I do confront it at once.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. You perfectly describe the process of how the healing works. And if anyone noticed, she used that word that I said at the beginning. What's the bridge? It took courage. It's exact what you just did. That process is exactly the process to go and heal anything. It's going to address it and then having the courage. The challenge gets to the little nuance of when you find it. It's not always easy to have that conversation with someone, because when you deal with past instances, or it's how can you adjust looking at something if that person's not there, where this sounds like more of a recent thing that happened, which gets a little easier. Because if you clear it up right away, that weight off your shoulder, what you're experiencing is the energy state change. You're literally releasing the negative energy, and it gets lighter. We are if we had a sensitive enough scale, we are less dense, we are lighter when we're at those higher states. Negative energy is heavier. And this is where we feel, and if you have a deep enough trauma, and depending on your level of sensitivity to your energy, which just sounds like yours is pretty high, that you felt that inside, you can literally feel energy leave your body when you uproot a deep enough trauma. It's amazing. Anything else, questions or? I put a link in the chat there to my recommendation page. So I have my top 9 book recommendations that links to.
I've learned over the course of my life that if I just keep retelling the stories of my trauma, it not only traumatizes me further, it actually traumatizes the people that are listening to me. But if I use it as a platform to help others, and instead of just rehashing that thing, if I say, this happened to me, this is what I learned from it, and because of my experiences, I can help you miss the pitfalls that I fell into. It tends to take the power of that trauma off of me. So
Yep.
basically, you're turning it as a source for good.
Yeah, well, okay, so a couple things. One, because I overstepped one thing, Shania, one thing that I would take out of your vocabulary, because language gets very important, is you're not trying, you're actually doing it. So you say you're trying to do it, take out trying, because that's not true. And that's important for the mind, because if the mind hears trying, then you're always going to be trying. And you're not. You are doing it, you are demonstrating it. So I did want to get back to that. Beth, to your comment, when you say rehash it, and this is what a lot of people go through, and this is where some people stray away from working with someone because they feel like, well, I don't want to go back there. It just doesn't make me feel good. You're rehashing it and you're reinforcing it, because when you're reliving it, you're back in that experience, back in that state of mind, in that trauma, which sounds like it's probably in a lower stage, whether it's shame, grief, apathy, or guilt, and you're retelling it within that same dialect of that experience. So you're not getting a benefit because you're just reinforcing that energy. So each state of consciousness in a way has its own dialect, because if you look at a very a good contrast of example, it's the difference between speaking out of anger as opposed to speaking out of love. We're not going to use the same terms or the same way of communicating or the same vocabulary out of each state. And if you get really fine-tuned, you'll notice that every state has a different way of speaking. This is how you can listen to someone and get a sense of where they're coming from at the source. And when you're sharing with as a teaching tool, what it sounds like is you're no longer speaking from that lower state, because now you're not speaking to yourself or reinforcing it to yourself or trying to be right. You're using it to share with others how the best you can hold yourself up, because you want them to benefit from them. So now you're pulling yourself up. What it sounds like at the most, you're at acceptance or you're at willingness. So you're speaking it from a different experience. So you're noticing it differently. Now, what it's missing there is the nuance of how to actually uproot that, because you can have it to where it doesn't bother you at all. And then when you share it with people, even with yourself, you won't be speaking from that same experience. So this is where the value of navigation comes in. And this is why it's one thing to cognitively know this stuff. It's another thing to truly understand and embody it and really get the nuance of navigation of, because there is a proper process, and either if you're in it, it's going to work, and if you're out of it, you're going to see where it's still going to be there. It's just because it's like gravity. You can't work it the way you want to work it. It works the way it works. Right? That's just how it is. So did that help?
Yeah, I mean, I am at a point of acceptance. I mean, I can talk about the things that traumatized me when I was younger, and it actually doesn't faze me at all.
Yeah, very good.
And so it's like, and because I didn't have anybody to lead me through that walk, it's something that I've just had to sort out for myself. I kind of use it now to help other people not have to sort it out. Like here, let me help you skip all this junk that I dealt with, And so, I mean, I'm sure at some point it's possible to go beyond where I am, and I would love to do that. And I would be more than happy to accept help getting there, because I mean, that's the next step.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're in a great place, being at acceptance in that higher mind. I mean, right there, you're in a great area, right? You're doing good. I mean, yeah, you can excel up higher. However, the biggest, at least when I'm coaching and I'm working with people, the biggest importance that I say is Not that you have to be in any one place. What we will work on though is operating above courage. You don't have to be in enlightenment, or there's no like, well, you're failing if you're not at love. No, it's, can we start operating above courage? And it's not that you're never going to have a negative experience. It's that you've learned the tools so well, you'll never get stuck there again. So it sounds like you're already doing great. Yeah, if you wanted to enhance that, I'd be happy to help you. However, it does sound like you've done a great deal of work, and what you're doing is very much a similar story to mine or to any entrepreneur. I've gone through the personal experience, and then I thought, well, who's gonna read 20 books, by doctors and neuroscientists and all these people, and then understand the information, and then take countless hours of courses and watch, hundreds of hours of videos. Or I can just condense it and then help people that way. So you're doing essentially the same thing at the level that you've gotten to, which is great, and I appreciate that.
Thank
Well,
you. I appreciate it.
Well, Nicholas, I think that's a great place to close. If anybody wants to connect, I know that it had it at the last slide of his presentation. It's going to be recorded. I'm going to send it out to all the level 2 members, but beingoneworld.com is his website. It's a great way if you want to actually book a coaching session with Nicholas. That's also very helpful for all of you to take advantage of and inquire about that if that's something that you would like to pursue further and get Nicholas's help. I just wanted to thank you so much, because you're just helping lift up the consciousness of all of our members, as well as, you're doing that on your own work. And so that we are becoming one world, right? So I found just this training very beneficial to me where I am in my life. I've made a commitment to stop criticizing, stop judging, and even conversations that I'm going to have this weekend, next week, I already come up with the whole idea of, I want to say this and I want to say that. I'm like, wait, those are actual judgment. Those are criticisms. I'm not in that level. And wow, if I was operating from a place of love, what would I say differently, right? What we've been learning in Landmark, who do you want to be as a possibility, or your affirmation, who I am love, I am peace, I am joy. So thank you so much, Nicholas. Really appreciate you. Hope everybody got a lot of value from this. Have a great day, everybody. And we're signing off. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.